everyone. Welcome to Psych Club. It's Tom Sydney Bushnell, aka Numbers, or as some like to call me now, Tom Numbers. I've got Rachel from Right Side Blonde here with us, and I've got Mr. 107 here driving around, and we're doing a Good Friday special, an Easter special for everybody. So, Rachel, welcome. Juan, welcome. How are you, Juan? What's happening?
Good, good. Well, you know, myself, I did a video that is over at 107 Daily with Jennifer Mack, and that video is Easter My Keister, and that was a couple of years ago now. I don't know, 2-3 years ago, and that probably over time's got 1.5 million views. I think is what we figured total between all the platforms. She just put it over at 107 Daily the other day, along with a bunch of the rest of her videos. And, you know, I still think it's got a fair amount of views in the last, week or whatever since she had it up. But the reason that I did that is because Easter or a ghoster, that's a cult holiday. That is celebrating Isis, or this Babylonian goddess, and is part of the problem, even in the churches and everything else, where in these holidays in the Western world, every one of them actually has an occult basis, but society, the people are conditioned to accept it even into the church as being the accepted terminology and identification, lots of fertility, and
you're cutting.
That we train children from a very earliest age to go use. So this whole idea that we as a people, as a society, are repeatedly conditioned over and over and over to accept things into our normal life and celebrate them, that actually have occult histories and backgrounds, whether it's Christmas with Satan Claus, or Valentine's Day. All sorts of these holidays have horrible bases.
Juan, could you we just got a bit of interference the last couple of minutes. Could you go back and just recap when you were talking about ISIS? I think you were doing a connection with Easter, but we couldn't hear it clearly. So if you wouldn't mind maybe just kind of going back over that first part, and then you've led up to Christmas. So I think that's what you were talking about, Easter, but it just, there was quite an extended period of interference, so we couldn't hear it clearly, so the viewers and listeners wouldn't have been able to hear that. If you wouldn't mind just recapping that, please.
All right, and I apologize. I thought I'd be in a much stronger broadcast area here, but Easter is a occult holiday. It celebrates the Babylonian goddess Aoster, or Isis, and so over and over again, all of these Western holidays that we are, with all the advertising and the push for us to accept and receive them in, the Easter egg, that's a fertility ritual. And we have children participating in this fertility ritual with the colored eggs, and go gather them up. In fact, this season that we're coming into, starting on the 19th of April, is all about the May festival, and that is in the occult, celebrated with especially focused. So we as a culture have been indoctrinated to accept and to embrace occultic celebrations, rituals, literally witchcraft, into our normal daily life as being okay, and to raise our children in that, even to the churches. Even the term Easter or Aoster why would we even refer to it that way from a church side? It's Passover Sunday. And by the way, you know, when you look at Passover, the first Passover day is actually Thursday night. So when we are celebrating starting on Friday, we're actually late to the game, because in the Hebrew way that they count days, the first of the day, the beginning of the day, is at sunset. And then it goes into the morning on the continuation of the day, and the day ends at the next sunset. So when Passover was being celebrated and Christ had the Passover dinner, that occurred on a Thursday night, if you kind of go by the way we count weeks. And as Christ finished that Passover meal, the beginning of that day during the evening, and then went to the garden where he prayed very, very fervently. He had warned the apostles for weeks in advance, even months, that it was necessary for him to suffer and be persecuted and die. And it was so clear and so dramatic. You know, people think, well, he, didn't say it very strong, or they would have did something. Peter himself, and you have to kind of think of who Peter is. Peter's this very mercurial apostle. He's all over the place. When they were up on top of the mountain, and it was Peter, James, and John, and Christ had what we call the transfiguration, where Moses and Elijah appeared with him and conversed with him, counseled with him. And so it was, their bodies shone, very brightly, and it was just, this heavenly experience on top of the mountain. And it was so shocking that Peter said to Christ, as this experience began to fade and end, and Christ returned to the apostles from where he was having this conversation with Moses and Elijah, Peter says, Lord, because this is such a beautiful, important experience, we need to build some booths here. Let me build some booths, kind of a small building or a cathedral to celebrate this location and make it a special place. And Christ told him no. Now, if you think about it, why? Because can you imagine today if Christ had said, yeah, go ahead and do it, if Peter or somebody else had decided to build those booths there? Today, you'd have a cathedral be a quarter mile or a half mile tall. It'd have spires all over it. It'd be plated in gold everywhere. You'd have tourist stations all around it, and buy your, Transfiguration t-shirt and get your stone that was pulled out of the ground right there at the Transfiguration site. Pictures and memorials, everything else. It'd be a huge tourist site. It would have celebrated it as the location, not what it really meant. It would have been twisted and altered in its meaning fairly dramatically. And so a lot of times, things get tweaked around. Well, Peter, he was the first one that wanted to do something that would have been part of the tweaking of this moment. And Christ said no. Then they come down off the mountain, and at a certain point, Christ is describing what's going to happen to him, where he's going to have to suffer and be persecuted, but it's part of God's plan. And Peter says, no, let it not happen. Stop it from being. And Christ had to rebuke him. Get thee behind me, Satan. Don't talk this way. You don't understand what you're saying. Peter was very mercurial in coming up with all these ideas. But at another moment, when Christ asked the apostles, who do men say that I am? And some of them said, well, some say you're John the Baptist reincarnated, because John the Baptist had been beheaded. Some said, you're Elijah, come back to earth or something. And, they're naming all these various things. And Christ turns to Peter and says, who do you say that I am? And Peter says, you're the Son of the living God. You're the Christ. Peter got it. Christ said to him, flesh and blood hath not revealed this to you, but the Spirit of God. So Peter, for all the times that he said things that were off base or wrong or wasn't what Christ intended, God intended, there was other times when he was, very, very inspired in his understanding and what he said and things like that. So, he's all over the map. And by the way, Peter, you go forward, they have this Last Supper, this Passover supper on Thursday night. And Christ is saying what's, going to have to happen. And at a certain moment, he says to Judas, what's in your heart to do, what you purpose to do, go do it now. And Judas goes out, and you have to picture Judas is this relative of Christ. According to many of the accounts, he was a cousin somewhere in the family, by many accounts. And so he wasn't just anybody amongst the apostles. He was even in the family, some, close or distant relative of Christ. And yet he goes out and betrays him. And because by some accounts, some of the people speculating on the rest of the relationship there, because he was somehow from the family, was a little bit older than Christ, he believed that he should and could be the one who was, chosen by God to do whatever. And he had always carried the offering bag that they would take their offerings in. And then when they needed supplies from the offering that was given by people to this, group of apostles and the people that were following on, which was probably a fairly large band of people. It wasn't just the 12, but some family members and other hangers on as they were traveling. They would have to get, supplies, food, anything that they might need. And so the offering was what the bag was that money would be taken out of, and Judas would disperse it to get the supplies they needed. And so for he held the bag, he was this central figure. It was always his money that he was offering out. And he got some kind of power from that, just like a politician. They didn't make the money, they didn't put it in the bag, they just control it. And yet they act as though it's their money. And then people look at them, because the money came from them, like they somehow are, dispensing all the stuff and making all the right decisions. And remember, when the woman came in this exact time period, just before the Passover dinner, and the woman came and she had a very, very expensive jar of ointment that would have cost about a year's wages. It was very expensive. And she anointed Christ from the head to the feet with this very expensive ointment that was a preservative and a perfume. And when she did this, she broke the bottle and anointed Christ's body with this, and then wiped her hair, wiped it off with her hair, which she apparently had long hair, part of the custom of the time. When she did that, Judas was totally offended, and he got all upset. And he says, why has this woman done this thing? It's like evil almost, because she wasted all this expensive ointment on you like this. That jar could have been sold, and the money put in the treasury, put in the bag, and helped everyone around us. It could have fed us for a long time. Our traveling trope of people could have been built up in numbers. We could have had hundreds of people following with us and supported all of them. And Christ rebuked him. Why? Because he didn't understand that what the woman had done, she had done at the very direction of God Almighty himself. She anointed his body for burial. And out throughout the time of the scriptures, all to this day, this is one of these most blessed things that ever happened, because she heard from God directly and did something that was under the direction of God Almighty to prepare him for burial, for his body for burial, his physical body for burial. And so Judas, and you have to think in this exact instant, he just got rebuked by Christ. He thought he was saying something very important and holy, very, worthy. Oh, Jesus, please, why? Why has she been so wasteful? Why did you allow this? You should have stopped her before she broke the jar and put all this ointment, wasted it on the ground like this and on you. And you could have done so much good, and he didn't understand. He wasn't hearing from God Almighty. He was just looking and speaking in a very temporal sense. So with that in mind, having been just rebuked by Christ, they go into this dinner, this Passover dinner, and Judas is fuming. He's been embarrassed in front of the other apostles. The money's not going in the bag like it's supposed to. He doesn't get revered like he is, because he would have been the one dispensing all that money. He'd have been perfect to become a senator, spending the money to take care of everyone. I'll make sure you get yours. And which district are you in? So they have this Passover dinner. And at the end of the dinner, Christ and Judas has gone off. He's left. Christ goes into the Garden of Gethsemane and he's praying. And he's praying so fervently. It says that he and James and John went into the garden. And they were so tired. And of course, you eat, food, and it, can put you to, make you very tired, put you to sleep. Blood sugar goes up. So, but it also says, because Christ was so clear and direct with this inner circle of apostles about what was about to happen, that he was going to have to be persecuted and die. He may have even alluded to Judas himself and what was going on. So he was clear enough. It says that the apostles slept for sorrow. If you've ever had something horrible happen in your life and it just wipes you out, and it says they slept for sorrow. They were just exhausted. They were beat up. And so when Christ saw them, he went a little further. He went further than they did, and then he prayed, and he prayed so fervently that he was sweating blood, which is actually a physical medical condition that can happen. And so he was sweating blood because he was praying so fervently, because he knew what was about to transpire. And but the apostles, he came back and tried to get them to come with him to pray, and they were just too tired. They just couldn't do it. When you go into some of the trials in life, and even your closest friends, at the moment that you're struggling the hardest, and they're not there for you. They don't get it. They're not grasping the magnitude of the situation you're in. And that was where Christ was. And then into the garden comes, if you will, and Judas, the Pharisees, the church people, and from the temple, and they come find Christ. There he is. And he points him out. That's him in the dark of night. at the midnight hour, and they take Christ into custody, and they go do the trial of Christ. And during this trial, which is taking place in the middle of the night, Peter denies Christ 3 times. I don't know him. I don't know him. They says, no, aren't you the guy that was walking around with Christ all the time? Isn't that you? Aren't you the one? And you were telling us all about what great deeds he was doing, and how he was going to save the world and everything. And Peter's, no, that wasn't me. Christ had told him before the night was over, he'd deny him 3 times. And he did. And before the cock crowed. So in the morning of that first day, when he heard the cock crowing, while he's standing by the fire, while this trial of Jesus is taking place, he realized that he had in fact betrayed Christ, and he was so embarrassed and ashamed, and snuck off away from where they were at. But Christ was going through this huge trial. In fact, just to picture, most people have no concept of how dramatic this trial really was. The people in the trial, this huge crowd, had been rabble-roused by the priests at the temple. Caiaphas, the high priest, had said, because he was disrupting the social order of the temple and of the church, if you will, the Jewish temple, he'd so disrupted it that Caiaphas says, and it was prophetic, even though he meant it evil, he says, isn't it worthwhile, beneficial, that one man should die to save the country? Doesn't that make sense? If it's got to be done to save the church, save the temple, it's better that one person die than everybody. And so, because they want to destroy their social order. If you were a woman and something happened, the money that went into the temple was to support you and help you. If you were a widow in that era, you didn't have strong sons or a man, you're a widow and childless. Your only place to get any food and support would be back at the temple and the church. So, and I'm blending terms here saying church, but that's something that people kind of understand, the crossover. And so when they were there accusing Christ of all these things, it was very clear. Christ had said, he who's seen me has seen the Father. And they accused him of blaspheming, that saying that he was God Almighty, and so he needed to be killed for blasphemy. And the people was like a rock concert almost, with the number of people. Everybody's there. It's nighttime. There's torches and fire and places to warm up because it's cold in the desert at night. And in this, huge operation in Josephus, it talks about there was such a roar, such a thunder with the crucify, crucify, crucify. Pilate at one point offered up a very notorious murderer, because Pilate's wife had warned him, no matter what, don't do anything to this man, because he's a messenger of God. He's, don't do anything evil to him. It'll come back on us. And so Pilate's trying his best to get the people to calm down. He's got to, he's a Roman prelate, and he's got to keep order in the region. Otherwise it comes down on him. Why can't you keep the people under control and not have drama? And so Pilate's trying to get this sorted out, come up with a compromise that keeps everybody happy. And he even offers up a murderer, which once a year they could offer up somebody to be released if the people wanted it. And so he says, I can release one person. I can release this most horrible Al Capone villain, who was very notorious at the time for all of his evil deeds, or I can release Christ. And they were, no, you got to crucify. Well, because the rabble rousers are in the background urging him to kill Christ. The high priest and all of the temple people that were on his side had picked a side, and they're siding with him to, wipe him out, take him out, get rid of him. So with that in mind, Josephus mentions that the crowd was so strong in its reverberations and the stomping of their feet that think of the rock concerts, or think of stadium events that we do today, and how the ground literally, reverberates with this, and that there was just a throng, this tempo that was going on amongst the people. And so just a huge event, and yet they wouldn't back off. And so to try and keep from having to go the full deed of crucifying Christ, he has Christ beaten, lashed with a whip 39 times. And the reason 39 is important is because it's one short of death. If you whip somebody with these whips that had all sorts of things embedded along the length of the whip, pieces of bone and glass and metal that would tear and rip the flesh off. If you've seen The Passion of the Christ with my friend Jim Caviezel, the portrayal of the horrendousness, the harshness of that whipping, it was so extreme, in fact, that when Christ was resurrected and walked with the apostles a few days later and explained everything to them, they didn't even recognize him. They'd walked with him for 3.5 years, and they couldn't recognize him because he bore all of the marks and tears on his body of that whipping. And but even whipping Christ like that, within 40 lashes was considered death. 39 was one whip shy of death. And by the way, too, one of the interesting things about that number, there's 39 different types of immunological responses for the body. The body has 39 different ways to respond to damage, to heal itself, to repair itself, to throw off infection and disease, to repair itself. So here you are, 39 different types. Christ received a lash in his body for every type of sickness and disease that can afflict the human body. It's interesting too that the maximum power of a spell in witchcraft is 3 times. 3 times magnification. Well, why is that also important? The 13 bloodline families, the families of Cain, those 13 bloodline families, their maximum power is 3 times 13. That's the reptilian snake family. And in this moment in time where we are being afflicted with materials that are based on, and you can go out and look at some of the broadcasts recently on that. I know many of your listeners are quite aware of it. The maximum power of that spell, that satanic evil curse that's been put out into our systems by multiple mechanisms. That's the Cainite bloodline family reptilian cursed that we're cursed with. And 3 times 13, 39 lashes. Christ received a stripe for every last one of them. And it was predicted hundreds of years before that in Isaiah, by his stripes we are healed. But with that in mind, that still wasn't enough for the crowd, because they were being roused up, they were being agitated by the clergy, the hierarchy. No, you got to kill this man. He's blasphemed God. No, what he did was he was diverting money that was going to the temple and people supporting the Jewish temple and its ways. The people were going to hear him out in the wilderness, out in the desert, out at the towns. They weren't coming to temple anymore. They were going out to church where they were hearing the word preached to them in an inspired way. And even the Pharisees, all the pastors and ministers and everything, they were shocked and amazed at his level of understanding and learning. And they're like, well, who did he learn under? Where did he go to school at? Where's his credentials? And yet he spoke with authority, and not just with authority, but with signs and wonders following, miracles. And then you come back to a guy like Peter. He had seen the sick healed. He had seen the demons dispossessed of their victims, cast out, returned to hell. He had seen all these incredible things. And yet at the moment that he was tested even just a little bit, he wasn't being beaten. He wasn't taken into captivity in any way. And yet he denies Christ 3 times. He just, he couldn't take the pressure. He falls asleep in the garden when Christ needs help with prayer, coming into this most difficult hour in, really human history, this crossroads moment. And, hopefully we learn from that and we're not the next ones. Here we are at this moment in America and the world when, of all times, the believers, those that look to God for guidance and for strength and want to do God's work, God's will, and they're all abandoning, no, we got to go get a deeper hidey hole. We've got to get more food and bury it in the ground. We got to hide out because the enemy's going to win. The one time when, God's army is raised up in the earth and supposed to, overcome evil and these evil doers and the snake venom being put out into society and into the world, figuratively and in reality and for real. And they're all worried about, have we got enough bullets and wheat and is the grinder down in the basement? Are we going to survive for a couple weeks longer than the next guy? Are we going to stop this somehow? That you think about that in the context of this moment we're in right now. Are we exercising faith, or is our faith futile because we don't believe that God will use us to do great works, good works, to overcome evil in this present age, this present moment? That was only back in the past. It's not for now. That's kind of the questions and discussions that you should be having. But Christ was crucified at noon on the first day, because remember, it started the night before with a Passover meal. And the Passover itself refers to Egypt, where the people were slaves, and all these miracles had occurred to, free the slaves from Egypt, to force Pharaoh to release them. And the last one was when the angel of death came and took the firstborn of the families, the males. And that was anybody that had the blood of a lamb spread on the lintel and the posts over the door, the top of the door sill and the posts on either side. The blood of the lamb was put there, and then the angel of death would pass over. What was that all about? It was about faith, that God would provide a sacrifice in its place. The lamb wasn't the thing that would save anybody because you sacrificed the lamb. It was symbolic. So then when you say, well, how important is it? I'm celebrating Easter, Aoster. It's just symbolic. We're playing with the Easter eggs and teaching the kids and everything else. Well, having a sacrificial lamb, a Passover meal, symbolic too. It wasn't the actual sacrifice. It was that you had faith that God was going to provide a sacrificial lamb that would be sufficient to nullify the sin from the garden. And by the way, here's something that very few people realize. In fact, I'm going to be doing a presentation on Sunday, Passover Sunday, 17th week of the year on the Gregorian calendar, 107th day on the Gregorian calendar, 17th day of the Hebrew calendar, and the 17th day of the Babylonian calendar this Sunday over at 107 Daily. And it'll be the first of continuing series over there. But the lamb, why lamb? Of all the animals that you would choose for significance to represent symbolically the sacrifice needed to save mankind from the penalty of sin, why a lamb? Do you know that the antivenom for snake bites is usually serum that comes from sheep's blood?
Juan, we're losing connection with you, buddy.
Why would it be a serum chosen?
Juan, can you repeat the last 30 seconds, please? You're just losing your connection.
Right.
You were talking about sheep and venom and antivenom.
Yes. So sheep. Why symbolic animal represent for why sheep? Why not cows or doves or something else, something innocent? Why sheep? Because of all the animals, what blood is used as the basis for the serum for antivenom for snake bites? Sheep's blood. Why? Because it's a natural antivenom. Sheep can get bit by snakes. They're grass eaters. They're not very able to defend themselves. They don't move very fast. They can walk up on snakes, especially when they're molting, and get bitten. So one of the interesting thing about sheep's, their natural defense system is as an antivenom, their blood. And in this moment where and there's those presentations are out there. I won't waste time on that right now, and I don't want to get your video. But that is based on snake venom, and so the antivenom is sheep's blood. Yes, it's symbology. Time to now that the Lamb of God, Christ, is referred to as the Lamb of God. The Lamb of God, his blood is able to save from all sin, from all of the venom, and save the world. And so there's all sorts of symbology here also, again, even for the American people at this critical moment in time, for the people out across the world to understand in England and in France and in Germany and Japan, that the antivenom, the Antillean blood curse on the world, the antivenom is the Lamb of Christ, the blood of the Lamb. So when Christ was crucified on the cross, that was the end of the first day. It said that the clouds, the sky turned black, and the weather became very inclement. And then at the time of Christ's death, one other interesting thing is recorded, and Josephus talks about it, as do other historians in various letters, that in the temple, in the Jewish temple, there was a curtain. It was a very heavy curtain made of all sorts of animal skins. And so these, beaver and goats and cattle and things like that. There's all these different layers of skins that made up this curtain that blocked the Holy of Holies, the inner area of the temple, from the outer area. And it was very symbolic of blood, which was necessary to pay for the penalty of sin and to block that out. So when Christ died, this thing was like a foot thick of just the thickest leathers all sewn together, and it was rent, it was torn completely from top to bottom. And the symbology was that the veil between humankind and God himself, to be able to be in communion, communicate, interact with God directly, was broken, so that we could reach out and touch God, that God could touch us, because there was no longer sin as a divider between man and God, and that it was torn by God's own hand when the blood sacrifice occurred, and that it was so strong and so thick, and yet could be, cut like paper tissue. Very important. So, and again, symbology, that we can reach out and talk to God directly. We don't have to go through an intermediary. We don't have to be in separation from God anymore. When that happened, that was at the end of the day of that first day, and they went into night. And then it's the scripture, Christ descended into hell. And what did he do there? He didn't go there because he was a soul captive of the devil. He went there because all those that had died in faith that God would provide a sacrifice at some later point in time, including all the way back to Adam. He went there and set the captives free. They did the biggest prison break in history, brought all the captives who died in faith, looking for that time when God would provide a sacrifice in place of each person for sin, and did the prison break, broke them free out of hell. And then he ascended, and was received as, this victor over sin and evil, and then into heaven, and then came back to the earth, rose from the dead. The rocks rolled away. That was where he was put in this tomb. There was a very rich man who we believe was his uncle, Joseph of Arimathea, who had a tomb that was built for him. And Joseph, in the history, Joseph was extremely wealthy. The legend is that he was the one who brought tin on ships, and the tin was used to make the metals stronger for the weapons of war and for the utensils, the cooking and everything else. And so the tin was blended in, and there's been all sorts of work done showing that the tin in Rome, or that the metals in Rome, were in fact strengthened by tin that came out of England. So Joseph's ships traveled to England and other places in the world, that he was a very wealthy merchant with ships. And so he had this tomb that was hollowed out of stone, and he had a big rock that was rolled in front of it that you couldn't just roll back with one man, very strong. And then there was a Roman army group, kind of a special forces group, that was posted in front of the tomb of Christ. And in spite of that protection to keep them from stealing the body in the middle of the night, because there was a common understanding that Christ had done all these miracles, including raising people from the dead, most notably Lazarus, there was a belief that he himself could be raised from the dead. That had been spoken around. It wasn't unknown. And so this Roman contingent is placed there to guard the tomb so nobody can steal the body and make any wild claims. And yet the stones rolled back on the third day. And out of the tomb, Christ had emerged. There's two different accounts in there. One that when they went into the tomb, his clothes were just laying there. And other account in the New Testament, they were neatly folded. Well, one of the things is that the women had come on this third day and they had ointments to pour over his body to keep the flesh from rotting and the stink from coming up. And this was kind of the burial ritual. And when they got there, the stone was already open and they couldn't do this ministry that they wanted to do. And so what happened was...
Juan, can you just rotate your camera? It seems like you're at a 90-degree angle. I thought it might flip back, but
I
didn't want to interrupt your flow because it was great stuff. But that's perfect. That's great. Thank you.
All right, there you go. Yeah, something twitched in your system or whatever. But anyway, with that in mind, they get there and the tomb is open. Christ isn't there. The soldiers are all, in some kind of horror because they're responsible for keeping Christ in that tomb. They, be probably under a threat of death themselves for having let this happen. And then over the next many days and weeks, Christ appeared first to the apostles privately. He was so torn up. His skin, his body was so mangled. It says they pulled his beard by the roots in the torture and torment of Christ. So he was so disfigured that while he was walking with his own apostles, they didn't even recognize him while he was explaining all the scriptures and the events. And you have to picture what had happened in Jerusalem during this period. Christ had come in triumphantly on a donkey, and people had thrown all their palm fronds in front of him, and he's being hailed and revered as some great prophet of God. And by the end of the week, the crowd had been turned on him, and he'd been assassinated, crucified in the most horrible of ways. And the vilification. And so the whole city is reverberating with, what's this all about? What's it mean? Can you imagine? Can you believe what just happened? Everybody's just shocked at this turn of events that have occurred over the course of this week. And so they're all talking about it. And then they're out on the road, on the highway, walking between towns, and this stranger shows up and explains the scriptures from beginning to the end. And at the end, as the apostles are walking, they realize, oh my gosh, it's you, Christ, it's you, Jesus. And it all starts to make sense. So he appeared a number of times, and then over the next 120 days, or 40 days, he appears multiple times to people before his ascension into heaven. And as they're all staring up and looking, they're told to go and occupy the land until his return. Why are you waiting here? And that's the good news that goes out to the world, that there has been a sacrifice for man, to God himself taking on human flesh, like we put on a coat or a jacket, and then stepping in in our place to suffer the penalty of sin, which is separation from God, and allow us to then have a relationship with God. That's why the veil had to be rent or broken, that we could then again have a relationship with God, like had occurred between Adam and God before sin entered the world, Adam and Eve. And so that's this whole story goes, I'm just skipping over details, and there's lots of people that'll do a more, elaborate presentation, I'm sure, over the next days and weeks for Easter. But that's just it in a thumbnail, what this moment in time is all about.
Thanks, Juan. That was magnificent. You did a nice little cover there when you said 120 and you said 160, which is Sound of Freedom, and you add the word days, which is 49, which is yes. That takes you to 209. 209 comes to James Patrick Caviezel. Passover is 115, which is Jim Caviezel. There's another 115 that I jotted down as well, if I can find it. Where is it? But there was some, yes, our great friend Jim. There was some great references there, because obviously he's played Christ. You mentioned the word dinner in regards to the Passover. Dinner is 64, which is also Peter, which is Zion, which is Jubilee, which is movie. So Judas and 30 pieces of silver comes to 337, which actually comes to November 5th, 1955, which is a Back to the Future reference. But there's been a lot of things in the newspapers about Back to the Future and time travel here in the UK, which have been nice comms. Transfiguration, interesting one. 192, the millennium with the new Chinese Republic and Steve Bannon. 192 is also Ivanka Marie Trump. There's plenty that I took down here. Thursday night. So Thursday is 116, which is actually Letitia. So Matt, our great friend that we did the last show with. Night is 58, which again is Star, which is Ivanka. But 116. So Thursday night takes plus 58 takes you to 174. 174 is currency exchange, which is the very first visual comm that we got from Melania and President Trump when they came down the escalators. 174 is trust the plan. It's eye of the storm. It's also yes, time travel. You spoke about rock concert. You said rock concert. Rock is 47, which is John. Concert is 78, which is Kennedy. Rock concert John Kennedy is 125. Is time travel. Is dark to light, which is a Q post. You talked about antivenom. Antivenom actually venom is 69, which is people. Anti, A-N-T-I, is 44, which is Anon, which is mask, which is Abraham. But if you do antivenom, that takes you to 113, which is trumpet, which is universe. It's also a reference to, depending on which side of the pond you are, either in England or in America, 113 is a reference to that event that took place in November 2020, 113. Snake venom is a very interesting one. So snake is 50. 50 is Donald, it's America. Venom is 69, it's checkmate, and it's people. So if you do snake venom, it's 50 plus 69, which takes you to 119, which takes you to Nikola Tesla, takes you to redemption, takes you to Mary Magdalene, takes you to foundation. So there was a lot of things that I jotted down, and I'm trying to just you also said Christ's blood. Christ's blood. Christ is 77, which is power, which is Hertz, which is quasar. Blood is 48, which is actually Tom. It's other things as well, but Christ's blood again comes to 125, which is time travel, which is John Kennedy. And you said blood of the lamb. Blood of the lamb. Lamb is 28, which is JR, which is Junior. Blood of the lamb comes to 108, which is Twilight, which is Fitzgerald, which is JFK's obviously middle name, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. So there was plenty of numbers that I saw, and as you were speaking, you made the reference as well about temple and church. Temple 71, which comes to Smart, which comes to Moses, comes to Lady Diana, 71, comes to Psych, which is my channel, Psych.Club. Church is 61, which is also miracle. So you talked about miracles. Miracles is 80, which is Spencer, Lady Diana Spencer. But if you do temple plus church, because you made the differentiation between the two, if you add them together, 71 plus 61, so temple plus church comes to 132, which is Princess Diana. It's also JFK Jr. is alive. So there was a lot of good comms that I saw. Cast out, you said about casting out. Cast is 43, which is book, which is wife, Mark. Out is 56, which is April, which is light, which is this month that we're in. Cast out comes to 99, 43 plus 56. 99 comes to judgment, it comes to ascension, but it also comes to patriot. So there was a lot of things that came up with that. You mentioned prayer, obviously. Prayer is 83, which is faithful. It's Caviezel. It's also election. It makes me think of the whole thing of calling an election, made sure more of a kind of scriptural reference. Anyway, there was a lot of great numbers through that discourse that you gave us, which I thought was fantastic. So there's probably a few that I've missed here, but these are ones I can kind of read from my notes as I was scribbling down. So, but thank you, that was amazing.
Well, the main thing is that when Adam had to leave the garden, he was kicked out because of sin, and Adam and Eve. You have to picture when Adam was in the garden, according to the lost books of Adam and Eve, in the translation there, and of course it's not scripture. It is kind of poetry. It's what the verbal history was that was handed down in the family prior to Abraham, all the way back to Adam. And it's a rendition of what the first 50 days were like after Adam and Eve had to leave the garden. And it was recorded in Egypt. It's the way the Egyptians understood Adam and Eve. It was recorded there by Joseph, who had scribes take down the family history, is what is reportedly, how this happened. We're getting this through glass darkly. That's the, myth of how this was done. But this Lost Books of Adam and Eve was this recording in Egypt of how the family history was carried down verbally and then put on paper. And in that, it says about Adam, for example, Adam, when he's loathing and whining and fussing about not being able to go back to the garden, and he's crying out to God, when I was in the garden, I could see the angels coming and going before your throne in heaven. In other words, his eyesight was so clear, so keen, that he could move his focus all the way to the heavens, to God's throne, and see the angels coming and going. That his eyesight was that clear and focused, and zoom capability or whatever. And yet he's complaining because it's so myopic now. He can barely see anything around him. And in fact, he can't even see clearly things that are directly in front of him. So for example, besides having fallen victim to the lies, the frauds of the devil himself there in the garden for him and Eve, that when they were outside the garden, they had such a horrendous fear of this serpent who was constantly trying to get to him, to kill him. And it said that Satan, Lucifer, the devil, he would take on different forms and through illusion and trickery, try to fool them. And so, for example, one time he fooled them into believing that he was an old man and conned them into following him. And they kept walking north further and further and further. And this was an old man, kind of a Santa Claus
image with the beard and the whole schmear. And as they kept going and going and going, they got more and more tired, and it was, a long journey. And then at some certain point, they realized this was the devil in disguise, and he was taking them to kill them. And God intervened by his angels and showed them what was going on. And they, broke out of the trance. They saw the devil for exactly who he was. But they were so myopic in their vision that they didn't even see clearly the threat that was right in front of their eyes. He morphed in his appearance, created an illusion in his appearance to Adam and Eve multiple times, and they didn't realize it was the devil right in front of them. And this is a practice that continues today, even with this serpentine, reptilian concoctions that are being put right in front of us, that are very clearly there to kill and maim and destroy, and yet it's right in front of your eyes and you can't see it. You don't get the story right. You don't hear it right. And it's only just now suddenly coming clear so that people can make a choice and understand it. So the way the devil has deceived and done illusions and trickery, that's like his personal calling card, the father of deception and lies. And so it's not just with your physical eyes, but with your spiritual eyes, with your other understandings that we don't see clearly now. And that was one of the things that Adam was so upset about, because he just, you have to picture Adam was the greatest scientist who ever lived. He named all the animals, not just, lamb, tiger, but broke them into the categories of exactly what species they were, what division of species they were. And the same thing with the plants. He brought order to the garden. That was his job. He was the caretaker of the garden and brought order to it and organized it. And then he had to leave, and he was outside the garden, and everything was hard. Nothing happened naturally. It was very harsh. And that's the beautiful thing about this first 50 days. Even their organs, their inner organs, couldn't digest food properly because they weren't fully formed. They ate the food in the garden, which was easy to digest. And outside the garden, their system wasn't fully formed and couldn't digest it. And God had to, at one point, give them some figs from the garden, just so they could get through those days, those first 50 days, till their system had readjusted to this harsh outer world. And so with that in mind, Adam and his offspring, Adam was pleading with God, please, 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 can't we go back to the garden? Please make it possible. Don't leave me in this horror, in this evil, harsh world. And God made a promise to Adam that he would be able to return to the garden at a future point in time, and that God himself would make a way of reconciliation between himself and man, between himself and Adam's children, so that they could be reconciled. And for those that might think, because I talk about the story of this child, Cain, being a hybrid and having the mixed blood, the mixed genetics of Satan, Lucifer, the devil himself. And out over time, virtually almost everybody on the planet probably has some mixed DNA, if that story is true. Has some mixed DNA going back to that. Well, if that was the case,
your camera's just gone there. One.
It's saying that my phone's overheated, so I apologize.
Okay.
Hopefully it'll cool down. But that this mixed DNA, maybe we all have some of the reptilian in us, and then even with what's going on right now today, with the mixing in of this serpent blood material serum into society and mankind today, that we somehow are under some kind of a threat of death, there's a lot of people that would wonder, are we going to be toast because of this? Are we going to, are we under some curse because we have Cainite blood in our system? In the New Testament, it says that the blood of Christ is able to cleanse from all sin, and that we would, if that's the case, that it doesn't matter that you have reptilian blood in your system. You can still be saved from the consequence of sin, which, original sin, if it came from the garden, if it was this merging of the DNA of the reptilian, the serpent DNA, and mankind, human DNA, that the blood of Christ is sufficient to cleanse from that for all mankind, so that we are no longer under the curse. Even if it's in your genetics, it can be cleared out. So if people have sifted in serpent DNA, venom, viperous DNA into the human systems during this time, through any mechanism, be it with putting it direct into your bloodstream, or in the water supply, or the food supply, etc., that God has made a way that within his system we can be cleansed of that. And in fact, that's part of this amazing moment of healing for the world, that is here for us through laying on of hands, healing of the nations, healing individually from all types of disease, because that's what Christ did. He went out and healed the sick. That was one of the things that the Pharisees and the high priests were so put off by, was that he was doing all these healings, but sorry about that, it's a little noisy. But he even healed people on the Sabbath day and offended them. Why would you heal people on the Sabbath? You can't do that. Well, if God's healing people, they weren't even looking at, is it God or is it Christ himself doing it? What's going on? And then he tells his apostles to go heal in his name. And even today, that's why you have ministries like Curry Blake's and similar all across the country. There's no spirit of exclusivity here. There's ministries all across the country, all across the world, who are operating under divine authority, scriptural authority, to bring healing. And so this horrendous curse on the world, this satanic attempt to destroy mankind, to kill off mankind, the solution is the blood of the Lamb and the healing that comes from that, the Lamb of God, in our place. And then all we have to do to accept it is to ask God to forgive us based on the blood of the Lamb and receive that. We don't do anything to earn it. We can't ourselves do good things and then be, reconciled with God. There was lots of people who did good things, but it was God himself that had to step in the way and pay the price, not, man by his own good deeds or something like that. So it's a more involved discussion for many, and I'm glossing over a lot of it just because it gets repetitive for some people, but people need to kind of think this through a bit. If I just spoke with someone earlier today that his wife is just been diagnosed with a horrendous brain cancer, and it's, it looks fatal, but God can heal that. There's many in the audience that, you don't know the moment that you might be leaving this earth, be it from some accident or longer term illness or whatever. But a lot of times, I thinking of a very close friend, went out and mowed his lawn, sat down on the porch. I know from our conversations, things that he was planning to acquire during the course of the week, things that he was going to go do. He had no conception that within minutes after finishing mowing the lawn that day, that was his last moments on this planet, and had a fatal heart event and died right there on his porch. So, you know, you don't know what your moment is that you're going to leave this world. You need to, you know, reconcile yourself with God so that you don't leave without having God in the right position with them to be able to cross over into the promised land, into God's heaven.
Rachel.
Yes, sorry, I've had myself muted because I don't know if you can hear this humming behind me or not, but I didn't want to interrupt Juan when he was talking. And I don't talk much when Juan's on, just because some people comment and they're like, Rachel, was she even there? Because when Juan's on, you just listen. So please don't comment under this video that I'm quiet. Of course I'm quiet. Juan's on, we be quiet and we just listen to Juan. So I'm just going to put that out there. But Juan, I have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
One of them is kind of a hot topic right now, is Project Looking Glass. From my understanding, everything kind of converged into one timeline, but I've seen a video that has gone kind of viral at this point that talks about the guardians of the Looking Glass and how there might be other timelines that are emerging. I didn't know if you could talk about that at all.
Well, it's a misunderstanding of what those projects are really about. Being able to project alternatives from certain actions is not the same as being able to walk across time and see what actually happens. Certainly, I've talked about how God sent his angel from the end times, and he walked across time like we walk across the street back to Daniel, who was praying to know what would be the fate of the Jews, the children of Israel, out in the future. And so this angel comes from the time of Armageddon and walks all the way back and tells Daniel exactly what he saw firsthand. And he didn't just instantly flash from one period to the next, because as he walked back through time, it said that he encountered the angel of Persia. And Persia didn't exist for 50 years yet out ahead of Daniel at that moment in time. It hadn't even become an entity yet. So when this angel encounters the dark angel over Persia, this principality, Persia wasn't even in existence yet, it names it. So he didn't just go boink, boink from one to the other. When you go to what Looking Glass is really about, it's extrapolations of information. It is not a time machine in the classic sense. And I know there's all sorts of people that, you know, speculated and written and said everything. And the reality is that the people involved are not talking. And so these projections are inaccurate. It's an extrapolation of events and possibilities, and not quite as outlandish as might otherwise be said by people.
So there are no guardians of the Looking Glass?
Yeah, what they're doing is they're ascribing things to, you know, an alien presence, a watcher presence, other things. And it's part of the illusions. It's just like with 47 and Roswell and all these other things. There is myths that have been implanted societally from multiple directions. And those myths are intended to precondition humankind, especially the Western world, to be ready to accept certain lies that will be brought. Our cousins are coming to save us, and from nuclear annihilation and from global warming and extinction and everything else. So we have to accept them, and whatever they say, we have to accept it. It's part of a demonic plan, a satanic plan, to condition us to accept this global governance and this alien domination, to choose the course for mankind. And part of the way that I would say that people should be very aware of, the little green men, from a Roswellian perspective. Well, all you have to do is go back and look at Aleister Crowley's writings and drawings, and the demon that was giving him special information and communicating things. And what is it? It's just the Roswell alien. If you look at, for example, with the Beatles album, and there's Aleister Crowley, who's the leader of the band. Over and over again, you see this wizardry that's been, part of the myths that are woven into society, sold into society, marketed into society to precondition you to accept certain things as true. For example, even in this current health issue that we're having right now, numerous television and movie productions have accurately portrayed what was going to happen, even with the use of certain venoms to damage your immune system in very specific ways. And that's all been preconditioned and written into the scripts, not just for the last decade, but for decades. Even go back to the Satan book in the 60s and that movie. There's numerous times that they have told you what they're going to do. They have to tell you what they're going to do. And then if you don't act against it, it's a sin of omission. If you haven't acted against it, then you accepted it, you agreed with it. And so the bad karma's on you for not fighting against it. And so in their way of thinking, they don't take the curse. They don't get punished by God. The punishment's on you for not doing anything to stop it when you knew what was going to happen, because they told you what they were going to do, even if it was through illusion. That's again this occultic, satanic mentality that ultimately goes to the breakaway, that is who are really fighting in the background. They want humankind to destroy itself, and then they walk out of the shadows and take over the earth because we've destroyed each other. And they're just staying out of the way while we destroy each other, and they get to own the world after the fact. And they need 13 out of every 14 people in existence alive today to terminate by one means or another: self-termination, wars, disease, self-inflicted, diet, whatever way you might do it. But if you destroy each other mutually through whatever means, they don't have the guilt when they come to take over the planet. It's because, well, they killed themselves. It's ours. Too bad. I got mine. Too bad about you. That's their mentality.
Did you see the Bill Wood, Carrie Cassidy interview?
No.
Okay. I was just going to ask what you thought of that, if there was truth to it, or because I've heard both sides of it. And obviously I'm trying to use discernment, but sometimes it's very difficult. So if you haven't seen it, then you can't really answer the question.
No.
Another question. I have 41 George magazines. I know that's weird, but this is totally an odd question. I've always wanted to ask
35 or 45, I'd understand better, but 47 works also. Go ahead.
41 USA TSB King. There you go.
Thanks, Tom.
Alien, yeah. 41.
I have a little problem with
always
41
makes sense of it.
Good.
The episode, I always put out an episode every Friday that just highlights one of the magazines, and I pick an article from within that's dealing with something that is currently
By the way,
going
you
on.
know why 41's important?
Why?
Well, who was present when the crime happened? But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mentioned that person.
Mm-hmm.
I think, if I'm thinking correctly, of which president.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, I was curious your thoughts of one. I've always wondered what you thought of George magazine. Can you talk about that?
Well, when you're trying to help get information into society about the actual perpetrators of the crimes, and this is an information war. So just like knowing the origins of our current physical sickness around the world, and what's really behind that, the actual mechanism itself, the nature of that mechanism, the length of time that the research was done to properly deploy it so that you had no way of escaping being subjected to that material, to damage your DNA, to damage you physically in your body, to lay the groundwork for the extinction of every child of Adam. If you don't have that knowledge and information, you can't react to it, guard against it, fight back. Information is a weapon, and lack of information leaves you exposed. You don't have armor. You can't arm yourself to defend yourself without correct, accurate information. That's why, for example, with 107 Daily, we're just now flipping to a new era there, which will be an information resource and communications location. There's plenty of people stressed that I haven't done more there myself, but until it was actually fully functional or very close to it, I didn't feel it was appropriate to do things there. That's changing right now. In fact, the first day of real posting there and my being present on a daily basis there will be on Passover Sunday, Resurrection Day, which, by the way, this Passover week is the 17th week of the year on the Gregorian calendar. It's also the 107th day of the year on the Gregorian calendar, this Passover Sunday, April 17th. It's the 17th day of the Hebrew calendar, the 17th day of the Babylonian calendar of the new year, because they start their year in the spring, not in the midwinter like we do in the Gregorian calendar. So there's 17s all over the place. It's a very interesting, fun little detail. But the communications from that day forward at 107 Daily are going to hopefully help people as they do their assessment of the world around them, the ability to have conversations and not be canceled out, as has been happening at other sites, or having to choke back what you say and talk in veiled speech. Because if you say things directly, then you're shut down. You can't communicate. Your voice is nullified. And that's not healthy. And that's part of the way that the enemy is succeeding, is because people aren't having honest conversations, in part because they can't. You know, one of the greatest tragedies, I spend a lot of time in Nevada. Nevada's education system is ranked 50th in America right now. I remember when it was Mississippi, and 49th was Arkansas, and now Nevada's replaced it as the worst education system in America. If you have people that aren't able to think for themselves, that aren't educated, that can't be educated because they don't have enough beginning points. If you can't read coherently, you can't understand things. You've limited down to only hearing it. And then if you don't, catch distinction between different spellings and words and things like that, you don't have the rudimentary pieces to be able to think straight, to think yourself out of a crisis. That's very dangerous. Is it wise to live someplace where you're constantly at the whim and will of people whose brains don't think coherently or straight? That's a very dangerous thing. I'm not just talking about Nevada. I'm talking about the whole world. That's just one where it's, a little clearer than it is other places at this point in time. We need to be able to have these conversations, mutually share information, educate each other about what's really going on, who these entities are, these people are, their mechanisms of trying to destroy us and get us to destroy each other, and think our way out of a wet paper bag.
Did you read JUAN when it was the 1990s?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, this was from today's episode. I discovered this. This is from the inaugural issue. I just discovered this, so that the words from the features page it appears to be Tiffany blue. And then on the other side, look what we find.
Mm-hmm. Pretty cool, huh?
It honestly, every time I look in them, oh, and this one too, I'll show this. This was all on one page. I don't know if you can see that.
Yes, absolutely. I actually have a wonderful collection of sci-fi magazines and books that's some of the best in the world, and some other publications. And I have all of the George magazines, and I enjoy all of them. Some with notes.
You have every single one, Juan?
And with notes, yes.
Wow. I'll have more. Don't worry. I have 41
I'll
for
have
now.
to
That's
pull
temporary.
some out. Some of them, some of the editing and stuff, kind of fun. I'll pull some out some point in time. We'll do it.
So really,
show a few things.
I don't know if you know who Matt Berman is, but he was the creative director of George magazine. Sure. And he commented on one of my Instagram posts, and I felt extremely special. I'm trying to reach out to him and try to do a show with him, but he hasn't responded yet. But I'm not giving up hope yet.
No, I mean, this moment is, we're in a changing moment in time. And even people that may have felt the need to remain in the sidelines are going to want to come forward and participate more directly, but it would have been premature up until a certain moment in time. So times are changing.
Oh, yes.
They are.
Yeah, they are. Juan, you said about 41, and you said who was president when the crime was committed. I'm wondering, what crime were we specifically talking about? Talking about the Gulf War?
Oh, numerous crimes. It's not just one. We've had crimes after crimes after crimes. Of course, 41 was President Bush.
Yeah.
So there's a number of things there that over time, I think that will become clearer and clearer.
This too.
Oh, yeah.
Just an advertisement.
Yeah. Now, lots of fun stuff there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just had to ask you that. I've been wondering for quite some time, and now I had the chance to ask you.
Yeah.
Say again,
no,
right?
go ahead.
I just asked if Tom had anything else.
Just what were you going to say? One, I did have one question.
No, go ahead. I didn't have any further. Go ahead.
Okay. So you mentioned you made slight reference to the breakaway. We obviously mentioned that in the episode we did with Matt in reference. Any further little snippets that we can talk about for that?
This isn't the time to get bogged down with that. I know there's people like to go there quite a bit. It is relevant over and over just as a place marker, but we have more instant crises that have to be addressed right now that are addressable at this instant in time. And so we have to stay focused. Let's put it this way. If there's a term, a word, something happening societally, and you can't talk about it, you can't have a different opinion or statement about it, then somebody who's decided what you can and can't talk about has decided, the way you have to interpret this moment in history, both into the past and looking forward, because it's dangerous for you to have a conversation, even to ask a question or to give somebody with a different viewpoint any ground to speak. That's very Orwellian. At this moment in time, if any agency of government tells you to do one thing, I would probably do the exact opposite. If any big major corporate advertiser told me to do one thing, I'd probably do the exact opposite just to save my life. And I'm not actually being, cheeky here. I'm dead serious, because they are so controlled and manipulated, controlling and manipulating, that their agendas are highly suspect. And if you're not being highly suspect of their agendas, you're not paying attention. You're being manipulated, and the people doing that manipulation, they're not just guys in a boardroom. There's a science behind it, looking at every word, every conversation to tweak and morph your the way you view the world around you, to distort it, to have you wearing rose-colored, blood-colored glasses, so that you see things. One thing about when you're doing art, when you're doing certain types of work in the graphics industry, you have different layers of colored tinted plastic covers you might put over to obscure certain parts of the art. So if I put a yellow cover over a piece of art, it makes all of the yellow parts of the art disappear. If I put red over it, it makes all the red parts of the art disappear. You don't see that. When you put on rose-colored glasses, you don't see the blood in all the stuff that they're doing. It becomes unclear, opaque. It masks it. And so much of what's happening to us, we're being cooked mentally to only see the world and the events with a narrower vision that isn't accurate, that isn't precise. And we have to guard against that, because you make decisions that aren't correct. One of the things, I had a person who was very close to me who had only one eye. And so this person was taking his driver's test, they didn't turn his head over his shoulder far enough, looking at, for backing up or whatever. And the instructor got very upset with him because he doesn't have depth perception with only one eye. And in fact, that's one of the things when you look at the one-eyed monster on top of the pyramids, this all-seeing divine God eye. You know what? It's actually pretty accurate. The devil himself wants to be like God, but he can't travel across time. He doesn't have but this one moment. He's a created being. He's not omniscient. If you were to say, we were talking about time a moment ago, God, the true God, there is no past or future for him. He lives in all moments in time simultaneously. I was thinking of a very personal event that happened many weeks ago. And the separation from that moment to this, the reality is, for God, the true God in heaven, that moment is as instant as this moment is. He's in both places simultaneously. He doesn't see time in a linear sense. God is present at that moment every bit as much as he is here right now. There is no time. He sees things multidimensionally at the same instant. And yet that all-seeing eye, that satanic figure that we're supposed to honor as being able to, see everything and doing, it is linear for Satan, the devil. He doesn't have depth perception because he doesn't have two eyes. He doesn't have multiple eyes. He's just got the one. And so he's even depicted accurately as not having that depth perception. We get depth perception because we have two eyes in the physical world. And in the spiritual world, you've got your soul and you've got the spirit, you've got depth perception. You need to exercise it. You need to realize how much the attack on us is occurring at the soul level and at the spiritual level. And, protect yourself accordingly. We're under attack. It's the greatest attack in the history of humanity. We are going to get through it. Those that choose to exercise their vision with divine assistance, the binocular vision that Adam had from the garden, that extra zone, they have a better likelihood of making it through this with divine assistance than those that aren't exercising and acting accordingly.
Very good. I love that analogy. I'd not thought of it like that. That was amazing. I'm looking. Sorry, go on, Rach.
I was just going to say I had lunch today, and you just brought up like 3 of the concepts that I talked about over lunch. So I'm kind of freaked out that you can hear my thoughts or something, or you're listening to my conversations. That was really creepy.
There you go. You said, well, I'm looking at your hat, and I was working out. Anyway, one of the things that has come to mind is Indiana Jones, and Indiana Jones has the hat, which has been, you've got a great image.
Cows don't recognize me without my hat. If I show up without my hat, they don't know who's there. The horse won't let me get on him.
There you go. But if we just say Indiana is 52, which is heart, which is ship, which is earth, and Jones is 63, which is 11. It's Friday. Today is Friday. It's Good Friday. But Indiana Jones is 115, which is Passover, which is Jim Caviezel. We've mentioned Jim, but also it's Twitter. 115 is Twitter, and there's a beautiful image in Back to the Future just before Marty McFly He's in 1955 with Emmett Brown 148, Simple Gematria, Donald J. Trump, Time Traveler, etc. But the DeLorean 74, Jesus, Messiah, Muhammad, Gematria, England. Sorry, London, I should say, English. There's a Bluebird Motel. There's a sign for a motel, and motel, Bluebird Motel comes to 138, comes to Donald Trump, but it also comes to is Elon Musk, because Elon Musk is 110, which is president, which is magic power, or the Christ, or President Marylebone here in England where I live. But so you can do the gematria on it. Simple. If you do Bluebird Motel, it comes to 138, which is Elon Musk. But it also says I am Twitter, because Twitter is 115. I am is 23. But obviously Elon has been in the news in the last week, 10 days or so, when he's bought Twitter. I'm wondering if there's any significance in that. And I noticed the Twitter symbol, and the Bluebird Motel has the blue motif, that has the blue symbol for the Twitter icon, which is, it's changed a few times over the years, but it's nevertheless, it's still a bluebird, which is the tweet, the tweet icon. And I remember seeing that probably a year and a half ago during this whole period that we've been in, and I saw it was, oh, that's Twitter, but I didn't know it was connected to Elon until this happened, which is everybody knows he's bought this Twitter stock. But it's there, in my opinion, very clearly demonstrated in the whole Back to the Future movie. And the interesting thing as well about it is it says start here. Start I think it's Kennedy, actually, 78. It's real Kennedy. Let me check. But the line, so what my point is, there's a marker of the Twitter symbol, the Bluebird Motel, and Marty is 77 Christ, power 77, turns the DeLorean around, DeLorean is 74, so you got the whole Jesus Christ thing. Drain the Swamp 151, the Josiah Reset 151, Jesus Christ 151. This is Easter, 68 Easter, but he's basically getting ready for the run up to time travel. You have to travel at 88 miles per hour. 125 is Christ's blood, John Kennedy. 125 dark to light, Q post. So I'm wondering, it seems to be speaking clearly to me that there's a connection between the timeline and Elon getting this Twitter stock. There's many other times they change time and time travel in the other movies, but this is the kind of last one they do just before they go back in the first series, in the first show. So what's the reality of Elon buying that stock one? It seemed like,
well, okay,
it was gone. But yeah, what's the deal with it?
Okay, so we have in the Back to the Future different timelines and different outcomes and different good guys and villains and winners and losers. Okay, so first off, let me give you the timeline that we're all going to experience. Number one, Elon's not going to be able to get Twitter. They're going to throw in a poison pill, and that's going to be toast. And I'm not a huge fan of Elon personally, for all that he's doing things and using the Tesla term and all that. It's actually personally, for reasons that I won't go into for the time being, I take a certain amount of offense, and I think Tesla himself would also, to applying his name to this series of products, and the significance of that. Certainly, every number has a positive use and a negative use. I use the example all the time of 5. 5 is the number of grace to God's people, of silver, of redemption. Within the occult, 5 is the number of death to enemies and defense. The goat depictions with 5
corners to the star, the pentagon with 5 sides. This is a war for the numbers. Even, by the way, the Babylonian 17th day of the year in the spring calendar, in this particular year, it's also the 17th day of the Hebrew year. It's also the day of the Passover Sunday, Resurrection Day. In the Osiris cult, the 17th day of the first month of the year was the date that Osiris was killed by his brother Set. And then in the same calendar day, his mom went out and gathered 13 of the 14 pieces and assembled them, but she couldn't find the 14th piece, which was the penis. And so she fashioned a penis out of stone, a dildo, attached it to his body, had sex with the dead corpse, and then supposedly becomes pregnant, has a child, Horus, which is the sun god, and Osiris is killed and resurrected through his son, all on the 17th day, because it doesn't count the physical birthday erupting from the womb, but the date of conception. For all of you people that don't think conception happens at the moment of, fertilization or something, well, from their perspective, it does. So the death and resurrection day of Osiris is the same as the resurrection day this year of the Christ, which is an office. It's not just a name, it's an office. The Christ, the substitute for every man to be suffer death and be resurrected. That's why we have to accept the death of Christ, that God paid the penalty on our behalf, himself taking on human flesh, and then taking on the penalty of sin on our behalf. This is, every number has a meaning, and they want to steal it for their purposes, but we have it for ours. So when you look at these numbers and you see, a good use and a bad use, doesn't mean that just because that you have one player and another player both having the same number, that, they must all be good or they must all be evil. There's a good use and a bad use. You will find the same numbers, and then you have to interpret and look to decide, is this, which way? And then, myself, and I've said it numerous times when we've done shows together, I do pay attention and am aware of the numbers in many, many situations. I don't run my life by the numbers. I don't order my events by the numbers as a general practice. I do find it interesting, but I don't try to order my life solely by the numbers. That said, circumstances, including some things behind the scenes, when I wanted to go full tilt over at 107 Daily, were scheduled to happen on April 1st. We were going to have a little April Fool's joke, because there's all sorts of time components related to how April 1st is. As it worked out, we had to push that, and then after the fact realized that, well, we were doing it on Passover Sunday, and it just so happens to be the 117th day of the year, in the 17th week of the year, 17th day of the Hebrew calendar, 17th day of the Babylonian calendar, a good and evil, 17th day, the day of death and resurrection of Osiris. But from a Christian standpoint, the celebrating the resurrection of Christ. All of these flips, reversals, contrasts, happening this way, and then we're aware of it, that the devil's trying to own the numbers just as God does. It's all significant.
Another one that's come out recently in the last week or so is So one of the phrases you used today was Passover supper. Passover is 115, supper is 95, SUPPER. If I spelled that right, yeah, supper, super, but 2P supper. So Passover supper, that comes to 210. That comes to the 4th of July, which is Independence Day. And I've seen a few things this week in regards to Independence Day. 128th Independence Day. If you just spell out if you just spell it out, but the 185th day of the year is July 4th, which is Independence Day. 185 is Donald John Trump. There are some other, that marry up to it from the other side, but I don't need to go there. But anything, Independence Day is always a great day, but anything that we should maybe be looking for or paying attention.
Well, remember the
one.
whole point of Passover Sunday, Resurrection Day, is that was the day that the slaves were freed. We're leaving slavery, slaves to sin, slaves to Satan, the devil, where we have this noose around our necks of permanent separation from God. Slaves no more. This theme that I've been sharing with people for this last decade, slaves no more. This is about reversing, flipping, as Roseanne says, the boomerang. Esther, the 17th book of the Bible, slaves no more. And we as a people of mankind, children of Adam, across the world, across the earth, have to throw off these binding things that seek to hold us in their grip, this python spirit, this choking serpentine attempt to choke out civilization, choke out the children of Adam from the earth and take over the earth. We have to throw that off, like Gulliver, rise up, break off all the bonds, and slaves no more. So, that's this moment that we are in as a people, as a world, and then judgment, trials for those that were involved in these evil acts against humanity. These, whether it be Tavistock Institute in England or Rand Corporation here in America, and all of their mechanisms to sell us down the road to buy in to their forms of slavery, mental slavery and physical slavery, and cast those off and be free, including in our minds. This is a big moment. That's what this turn is all about. Literally, Resurrection Sunday and beyond, for America, for the world, we are going to march right to the gates of hell and free those people that are prisoners and bring them out of mental slavery and show to the world what's being done against them, both here in the United States in the name of America, a captured operation, and other countries around the world, including England, where we've been operating as a captured operation, doing somebody else's will for somebody else's purposes, both internally and externally, against the very throne of God, to destroy mankind. And we're not going to participate. We're going to throw it off.
You said slaves no more, and that comes to 158, which is the Julian calendar. We were talking about the Gregorian calendar, which is 185. You said the Babylonian, and I think you said the Hebrew, they start on the 1st of April. Would those calendars say on the 1st of April, would they call it January? Is everyone there?
Yeah.
So they would, on the 1st of April, the Hebrew, the Babylonian calendar would would actually be the 1st of January. Is that how they would declare it?
Yeah, it's the first of their new year.
Okay.
It isn't January, but it's the first of their new year. They start their calendar year with the spring and run it through to the following spring. So, but yeah.
So they call their months or their periods of time by completely different names. Is that?
Well, they started in relation to the moon cycles and the spring equinox, as opposed to the winter cycles and the winter solstice. So each of the calendars is a little different, and you know, the way they want to measure time. And of course, that's why we went from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, and they created April Fool's Day, April 1st, because the whole idea was to restart the calendar, control time. One of the things that's tied to that, which the people in England and really across the world should be kind of watching. Yeah, my phone's overheating. I apologize. Okay. But one of the things about the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar is that that calendar day with April Fools was about not counting a particular day to get the calendar count right, because the season was moving slowly year to year to year on the planting season, because they didn't include that quarter day included in the Gregorian calendar. That came from stuff that was from the Aztec calendars when the first ships came to South America.
Are we going, as we move forward, are we going to do a reset of the calendar at any point? Is that something we would need to do to make things kind of whole again?
Yes, the Antichrist, from a scriptural standpoint, wants to change times and seasons to institute a new calendar, most likely related to a moon calendar, not a sun calendar, and 13 months in the year, if you would. And then one of the things that is probably tied to that's right there in your own neighborhood. I'd be watching very carefully the date of the restarting of Big Ben, the clock. And of course, the other thing is with the dates that I just gave you, you know, within events occurring within the royal family, what's the correlation to a Babylonian calendar, a moon calendar, Ishtar, Aoster, Isis, Osiris calendar and events. We know that a number of leaders were preserved, if you will, so that their death date, their departure from this world, could be timed very precisely at a celestial level, because in the cult that these people are part of, they have certain strength and values, even for illusion and imagery, the magic, for others observing and marking time by when they would depart this world and be received into the next world, etc. And so they will cook the time to leave with exacting precision by whatever mechanical means they can, you know, bring into play, or at least the illusion thereof. And again, we're talking about 41, all sorts of symbology on that departure date, or Haile Selassie, same thing in Africa and the imagery there. This is a repeating theme. And then even in witchcraft, oftentimes when a very high ranking witch, which by the way, most of the time the witches are actually wanting to be both male and female, not one or the other, masquerading as women. But when they would depart or die, oftentimes they would die during a festival or celebration with some exacting precision. And then the one that's taking their place would breathe in their very last scheduled breath. And with that breath, take in all the demons from that prior witch and continue on. And they do that so the demons don't, aren't without a host. They're parasites. And so a lot of this stuff is very dark and not understood by most people because they don't live their life that way. They don't think that way. But within the cult, within the satanic cults, and there's numerous of them that worship in different ways, but there's certain themes that are the same in all of them. Devil has 1,000 faces, but it's still the same devil. It's all illusion. That's what you see in the lost books of Adam and Eve. He kept coming back as though it was somebody different, but it was the same devil each time when the veil was removed. There it is, the same devil that deceived him in the garden, but he was presenting himself in different forms to them. And as they became more and more aware of all of his illusions, all of his various forms in those first 50 days, once they saw who it was behind it, they couldn't be fooled the same way again. And I would just say that in this moment in time, in this moment in our societies, as you see the serpent, the dragon, the devil himself, and it's revealed to you what's been done against you and the mechanisms of it, don't ever be fooled that way again, and be super sharp to it. There will be a world court, and we will have all of this made clear, and it has to happen that way. We have to go after the monsters.
Sounds like the movie Hocus Pocus one.
Yeah.
Just the breathing in of the demons and witches, and they literally do show us, don't they?
They show you exactly what they're doing. Yeah, I mean, you look at the events, whether it's the Super Bowl or the Olympics. In the 2012 Olympics, they showed you what they were going to do. Oh, yeah. They had people from all the different sports representatives. Each nation brought a petal of the flower, and they brought these petals and assembled a flower in the middle of the stadium. And when you looked at it close, you realized it wasn't a flower. It was a kettle, a cauldron. And they made a witch's brew. Eye of bat, bat wing, venom of the serpent, snake, dragon, they get all this stuff in there and they stir it up. And then after they've stirred up the cauldron with the magic, both what you see on the stadium and what's occurring beneath it, and syncopatically at other locations, they made this witch's brew. And then at the end of the Olympics, all of the teams, their representative goes and takes a petal of the flower, and they go home with the disease, the monster of what was brewed in that cauldron. That's what we've had happen to us today here in the world. We're going to come against it. The snake's brew, the demon brew, the venom. We'll expose it. There is cures. There is ways to address it. If you wake up in time and you fight to learn and know the truth, and it's an ongoing battle. We're going to have to be assertive and aggressive, and you're going to have to take time to learn what you have to do to offset it. And then in the physical and in the spiritual, not be polluted in your mind. Have the DNA in your heart and soul change. That's the blood of the Lamb in a spiritual sense, to neutralize the venom that's in your mind, in your soul, as well as that's in your physical.
Juan, you said about Big Ben when it restarts. I just looked up online, and it says after the test period of this spring, do you know any times when it's supposed to kind of start officially again?
Well, they've not disclosed that at all anywhere during the entire time that it was down. I can guarantee you the wizards, the Merlins, the magicians behind that know exactly when they want to restart it, but they want to leave the excitement for the moment. And they'll do all sorts of Fifth Avenue advertising and make it all special and have all sorts of significance and everything. Why? Because they want to control times and seasons. They want to be like God, and they want to exercise power like God. It's just like the daylight savings time. They can move time forward or back, and you have to live with how they adjust time. It's an illusion. They haven't moved the sun. They haven't changed when the spring equinox is. They haven't changed when the winter solstice is. Those mechanisms in heaven, God himself hasn't changed that, and they haven't changed what God has set in its courses in place, but they want the illusion of controlling time. And so they, that's what they're trying to do.
So we're probably looking at May 1st, aren't we? So.
Well, I don't know that. I think they will take a little more time to get everybody excited about that. It may very well be rushed or hurried because of some event, and they want to mark an event that may happen without a lot of notice, and then suddenly, well, we were close, but because of this, we want to celebrate and mark and denote something. And so again, these are wizards, Merlins, magicians, and they want an illusion to capture the minds of the world. And so they will do it with pomp and circumstance, and it'll be an accident that it happened, but it will coincide with a need. And so we've done this because, oh my goodness, it'll be so wonderful to do it now, and we can rush and get it just right, just in the nick of time. It's all bullshit.
Yeah, because May is 39, which comes to Big Ben, and May 1st is 72. That comes to 111, which comes to illusion. So, and maybe I keep feeling like it's something along the lines of Betty Windsor. When the Queen gets taken off the chessboard, maybe it will be that, the rush movement. I guess we'll see. But
well, it may not be the Queen. It may be the replacement. So
it may be the replacement.
Sure. There's for those that want to look, Prince William was 5,555 days old. I think 5 hours at the time that his mother passed, and then he was 5,555 days old. I think 5 hours and 55 minutes plus or minus 30 seconds at the moment that the casket passed in front of him, the casaque passed in front of him, and his brother Harry and his father. Those types of events, there's a satanic genius to it. There's a Merlin genius to it. And the number chosen is extremely important within the occult, within the imagery, within the mystery. These things are not as happenstance as most would believe.
So the replacement, you say the replacement, can you elaborate on that?
We'll save that for now.
Okay.
The once and future king.
The what?
The once and future king.
Okay. So there might be some, so you're saying that maybe it's not going to be linear. Maybe pieces get moved off of the board out of sequence from what we'd maybe usually expect.
Well, if you're going to control time, what's time travel? If you can control the clocks, do you actually control time, or do you control the illusion of time? Every great magician, illusionist, do they actually do what they purport to do? Yes, they do an illusion that accomplishes the impossible. But it is an illusion. They pull off an illusion. And so perception is reality. And they intend for the perception to be that the once and future king has arisen, has, come on the stage. It is a stage. It is, theater. So I've got, yeah, go ahead.
No, so with that phraseology, are you suggesting that we might see Charles go before Elizabeth?
No.
We're talking about William.
Just that, again, who says that you only get one and not the other? Maybe you get both in different places. I've already talked about that previously. Let's see how it plays out. These are Merlins, wizards, magicians, and they know exactly what they intend to do. We're looking through a glass darkly. After the fact, it'll be clear, but they're not winging it as much as one might think. They have a very precise plan because they have precise outcomes they're trying to. It's always the high priests behind the throne in these occult circles. It's not about Pharaoh. It's not about the king. It's not about the president. It's about the wizards, the magicians, the Merlins, the high priests in their robes behind the throne, actually controlling what's going on.
Talking of that, you said earlier in the conversation about you're talking about the green men and the greys. I think you said the greys, or
yeah.
So if you think of, I guess a general perception of aliens is something kind of out of this world, visiting, Earth, and even things like demons, the greys that you were saying about, that is kind of off-worldly in many ways because it's not in most people's reality. So are we?
Well, okay, let's clarify that a bit. First off, the devil is Satan, Lucifer, Samael, is also described as the green man. Okay, why? Because he hid amongst the green leaves. He was chameleon-like.
Right.
What's the little green men? The demons, the purveyors of that. But you have it right there, Moody Blues, Nights in White Satin. The colors washed away in the moonlit night. The different colors morph into gray. In that twilight night, moon illuminated landscape, when the aliens show up, the little green men are the grays. You don't see the color. Go listen to Nights in White Satin again. What a beautiful, some of the best music ever on the planet. I give it to the Brits, man. If they, they got some great people doing some amazing stuff with the music, but that's what the washed out color is, the gray. It's just the little green men, the demons of the devil himself. And you buy into it. Aleister Crowley's demonology. And you're being sold a particular idea that our cousins, are coming to save us. We would destroy ourselves. Look at the imagery with the movie The Day the World Ends. I'm trying to think of it with the one that's gonna. No, what is that movie? They just redid it. It came out in the 50s.
No, I don't know.
No, No.
War of the World?
No. The one where he shows up and he has the robot that's gonna zap everything, and it's actually the guy that's controlling the robot, and the robot's just a part of the distraction. I can't believe I can't think of the movie right off the top of my head. But anyway, again, they're trying to cook you with imagery and illusions in every way possible, so that you'll accept the illusion as true when the time comes. Even the stuff with the royals, they'll claim that there are earthly cousins planted here eons ago to help us, and that they're in fact part alien, part human. What's the devil in the garden? He's not human, so he's an alien. I mean, that's part of the imagery, the illusion. These gods, these pre-Adamic entities. So anyway, I've got folks waiting for me. I've got to get to an appointment
that's
there.
A good time to wrap up. So thanks, Juan. Where can people find you? Well, we'll put the links. So 107 Daily, people can find Juan there. Rachel, we'll put your links. Right Side Blonde on YouTube, and here on Psych.Club. And also check out the Tom Numbers Show. That's the new channel I've got. We've got some great episodes. People like Michael Gambon from Harry Potter.
Well, we'll set you up over at 107. Yeah. If you want to post over there, we'll set you up so you can post everything over there also.
Yeah, we'll put them over there as well.
That's happening right this second. We'll have a number of hosts over there in the next few days, and with their stuff. And love to have you there, and people will enjoy seeing you there.
Good stuff, man. So we've got some, and so check out all the links. We'll put all the links there. So 107 Daily, Rachel Right Side Blonde, Psych.Club, and the Tom Numbers Show. So, all right, everyone. Thanks a lot, Juan. God bless. Happy Easter. Happy Good Friday. And we'll see you soon. Take care.
All right.
Hey,
appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, Juan.
Right.
Thanks, Rachel.
Right.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.